I made it up to Boston to see Cy Twombly making past present at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Sad to say, I was the only sculpture forum guy to make it up there. I spent 3 or 4 hours in the museum, going back and forth between the Twombly show and the museum's permanent collection of ancient Greek and Roman art, but I never really got my bearings. The show was a kind of milky soup for me, but it got me thinking. At least this sculpture forum is going to be short. I've never, or at least not since I met Leland Bell close to 50 years ago, been a big fan of Twombly's work, or of Rauschenberg's, or of Johns's, though I think what Rauschenberg and Johns and maybe Twombly did for Merce Cunningham, the really great dancer, choreographer, the sets they made for him, their financial support, was really important. And I remember being surprised one day, 15 or 20 years ago, talking to Nick Caroni, one of my studio school hero teachers, to hear that Nick and Twombly were friends. They really mattered to each other. Rauschenberg, for me, is the guy who erased a de Kooning drawing and called what he, Rauschenberg, not de Kooning, did art. My grandmother might have called it just a cheeky thing to do. There is lots of erasure in Twombly's work. It's not really cheeky, though. Twombly was always genuinely struggling to make marks that stick to his canvases. Struggling and often openly failing. He wanted to make his marks stick, and he wanted to say something with his marks. These are virtuous aspirations, fundamental aspirations. I don't believe he succeeds, but that's not important. I didn't go up to Boston to pass judgment on Twombly's paintings. I wanted to see his sculpture and how it looked beside the ancient Greek and Roman sculpture from the Boston Museum's and Twombly's own collection. It was fun looking at the old sculpture. I look at the ancient Greek and Roman stuff in New York's Metropolitan Museum regularly. I don't look at it the way Johann Winkelmann did back in the 18th century, with awe, seeing a noble simplicity and a calm grandeur. A lot of the stuff at the Met looks kind of silly to me, though some of the small pieces still can take my breath away. There are some nice pieces in the Boston Museum collection. The pieces Twombly collected were respectable. Old sculpture is presented with great care in American museums, at least the ones I've visited. I spent 6 weeks in Italy back in 1995. I had followed Bruce Gagne to a school where he and Nick Caroni were teaching. Bruce spent a number of summers in Italy back in the 90s. In Italy, there's tons really, of old sculpture. Some Italian museums are like garages full of car parts. Bruce taught me that you can get closer to the sculpture by relaxing the awe you might feel. I can't say I've studied the classics, but I did study Latin starting in 7th grade with Doug Lawley. In 10th grade, Mr. Howard told me I was too lazy and stupid to continue with Latin. But I still remember Doug Lawley. There were lots of pop quizzes in Lawley's class, and he drew while we students declined or conjugated this or that noun or verb. He drew horses from his memory of the horses on Sable Island, a magical but real island off the coast of Nova Scotia. If you did well on a quiz, he might give you a drawing. They were nice drawings, at least as I remember them, much better than the paintings of his you can find on the internet, though the paintings aren't bad. Thing is, I'm happy looking at Twombly with Doug Lawley in the back of my mind. But with Bruce Gagne closer to the front of my mind, I'm less happy. Twombly's sculpture can be a kind of doorway to Bruce's sculpture. Twombly has a nice feeling for plaster and for the color white. So does Bruce, though Bruce's feeling for plaster comes out of his feeling for and his long hours working with clay. Bruce works in plastiline now. Clay's too easy for him. He needs some resistance from, needs to fight against or with the material he's working with. There's not much fight in a Twombly sculpture. Twombly's structures are unbelievably elementary, unbelievably both in the sense that they're kind of surprising, and in the sense that I just don't believe them. They make no impact on me. Often they're kind of flagrantly flimsy, about to break or already broken. Bruce literally broke casts of some of his early figures, and then he glued the parts back together in a kind of wildly disjointed fashion, searching for an unfamiliar rhythm. His own rhythm, maybe. Maybe a living rhythm is a better way to describe it. A rhythm that's alive to all that's going on in the world. That search has continued for years. There's an American kind of innocence, a complicated kind of innocence to the figures he's making today. An innocence comparable to, but very different from, the innocence of Ellie Nadelman's late figurines. Nadelman was another American who loved ancient Greek and Roman sculpture. One of Yves Bonnefoy's great books on painting is called The Lure and the Truth of Painting. Paintings can deceive us. They can lure us into a dream world, and they can snap us back to earth. Bonnefoy's writing can be pretty hairy, but I've grown to trust him. The writing in the catalog for the Twombly show is kind of hairy too. It's all very intelligent, but I'm afraid the writers have been lured by the paintings away from the earth into a literary dream world. That said, I have to mention Brooke Holmes. Her writing in the catalog impressed me so much, I bought her book, The Symptom and the Subject, The Emergence of the Physical Body in Ancient Greece. I've even started to read her book. It's not really about sculpture, but it's helping me, not with Twombly's work, but with Bruce's. I'm thinking Bruce's subject is our symptoms. For Holmes, a symptom is a way of thinking about appearance and reality. I've never talked to Bruce about symptoms, but I have spent a lot of time with him in classes studying appearances. The appearance of Bruce's figures can be disturbing, even revolting, but looked at as sculpture, looking at the abstract plastic dimension of his figures, they're beautiful, perfect in a way. I don't think even Bruce understands this contradiction. Maybe he's trying to understand it in these wonderful photographs by Maxine Markovitch. There's a hint of comedy in the photographs, somehow hints of joyousness in Bruce's figures, too. Writing about art is very difficult, next to impossible, really. But it's too easy not to write, not to think as you look at art, not to think as you make art. Anne Carson has a terrific little poem in the current London Review of Books. It's called, No, You May Not Write About Me. I see all the thinking, there's a lot of it, all the emotional complexity of the poem in an early head of Bruce's. I'm sorry to say I don't see anything like the emotional complexity of Anne's poem in Twombly's work.